And that's for you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Harry. Thank you, Katie. It's great to be here today. Harry's brought me along to depress the hell out of you.
Excellent.
Not really, maybe a little. I hope at the end of this you'll see that there is reasons for optimism, but there is going to be a little bit of pessimism in this. I'm going to talk about this in a moment, but first of all, I wanted to tell you a bit about why I ended up being here today. I started life as a broadcast journalist, eventually going on to edit the 6 and 10 o'clock news. And that was at a time when we sort of counted our audience in the many, many millions. I then spent a year running BBC Global, which is everything that's BBC outside the UK. And then I got a phone call out of the blue from David Cameron. And he rang me up and said, do you want to be my director of politics and communications at 10 Downing Street? And I think if you're a journalist, curiosity is just like a thing, like you're wanting to see behind the curtain. And they say that curiosity killed the cat. Well, it nearly killed me. Yes, there were extraordinary moments. I got to fly on Air Force One. I remember that, just the extraordinary experience of that. And there was the most excellent sort of presidential merch there. I remember there were these sort of M&M boxes with Barack Obama's signature on them. And I went around hoovering them all up. And then one of the stewards sort of tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Sir, there is a goodie bag. You don't have to." And the trip got better and better. I was standing in the queue waiting to meet Barack Obama and Michelle Obama. And I was talking to Obama's LGBTQ fundraiser who'd raised $500 million. And he was really interested in the fact that a conservative administration in the UK was legalizing gay marriage. But in America, a Democratic organization hadn't been able to do that so far. And I got a tap on the shoulder and somebody said, "Look, this sounds like a really interesting conversation." And I turned to see it was George Clooney. And so those are the sort of high points of being director of politics and communications at number 10 Downing Street. But the day-to-day reality was much tougher. I describe it as like being thrown into the white water rapids, realizing we tend to only remember the survivors, and a lot of people who go into politics sort of bash their heads on the rocks and drown, and you never hear of them again. And I realized that quite quickly. And it became clearer and clearer to me that we were on a frontier. A brave new world of social media had press fast forward on absolutely everything. And we were the sort of canaries in the coal mine, if I can mix my metaphors on that, in terms of dealing with that. And we learned very, very quickly that influence was atomizing, where media was atomizing, and tribalism, self-righteousness, and alternative facts were very much coming to the fore. And since I was in number 10, I think that's really only intensified that idea. And it's created a kind of curiosity in me about how does the world tick, where is it going? And I'm now the global head of strategy and reputation at an organization called FGS Global. And that's allowed me to spend quite a lot of money doing a lot of research into where the world is going. And this year we interviewed some of the world's top leaders and influencers in business, politics and media to see where is the world going this year. To give you a flavour, Rene Haas, the CEO of Arm, Emma Tucker, the editor of the Wall Street Journal, Richard Tice, the deputy leader of Reform, Anthony Scaramucci, the former spokesman for Donald Trump, Jonathan Reynolds, the current chief whip, Laura Trott, the shadow education secretary, my old boss David Cameron, Christian Saving, who's the CEO of Deutsche Bank, podcasters Emily Maitlis and Rory Stewart, Roland Bush, who's the CEO of Siemens, Tim Davey, who's the outgoing Director General of the BBC, and Shriti Vadera, the chair of Prudential, and many, many more. In total, 175 people in those areas around the world. We also conducted nationally representative polls in the US, Canada, the EU, UK and Japan. And in total, that was 20,000 people, representatives in democracies around the world. And we've called this year's radar a rewired world. And that's because previous years have been defined by unpredictability and volatility. They're going to continue in 2026, but in a much more clearly defined world. And in this rewired world, we're seeing the United States explicitly ending the post-war settlement defined by international institutions supporting liberal democracy. Those institutions have been weakened with strong leaders calling the shots. And nowhere, I think, was this clearer than Donald Trump ordering special forces to go into Venezuela and arrest Nicolás Maduro a couple of weeks ago. The USA and China are now in fierce competition to achieve dominance, and grey zone conflict will become common around the world this year. The rest of the world is having to align itself accordingly. And constant tech disruption, as Katie said, is just going to become a very, very common feature of what's going on. We also think that this year's FGS Radar is a kind of wake-up call to leaders across democracies. The public have been losing confidence and trust for years, but the mood of pessimism is intensified, and it's now at crisis levels around the world. In all the 27 countries we polled, a substantial majority of people believe life will be harder for the next generation, 73%. My country feels divided, 76%. The political system in my country is failing the people and needs fundamental reform, 68%. And in almost all the 27 countries polled, most people say our national identity is disappearing, 62%. And to be clear, pessimism on this scale, replicated across democracies, isn't normal, and it may not be sustainable. It's also clear 2026 will be characterized by multiple divides. Many stakeholders see these gaps widening and reinforcing each other this year, fueling political instability and populism. We'll discuss a bit later something called the K-shaped economy, but we're also living in a K-shaped world with a fundamental divide between established leaders and the public on the challenges covered in this report. Ideas like letting AI flourish, cutting spending and incentivizing entrepreneurs are widely favored by leaders in their fields, but all are roundly opposed by voters. More to the point, they are susceptible to populist claims that difficult trade-offs don't need to be made. In our poll, most people agreed with the proposition there are clear and easy solutions to the big challenges facing the country. So I'm a bit one behind. There are clear and easy solutions to the big challenges facing the country if only we had political leaders doing better. The other major divide is old versus young. This was underscored by the fact that both sides, old and young, believe that resource is skewed to the other. 54% of 18 to 34-year-olds believe too much support goes to the elderly. 50% of over 55s think too much support goes to the young. Younger adults feel locked out of opportunities to build wealth. In all the 27 countries we polled, the public, not just younger adults, believe life will be harder for the next generation, as I said earlier, a staggering 73%. 2026 is already a year of strong leaders and weakening institutions, as I said. The UN Secretary General complained bitterly about Donald Trump going into Venezuela to no effect. One expert's comment seems bang on target. The post-war rules-based order is fragmenting into spheres of influence with transactional relationships and strongman leadership supplanting shared values. There was consensus among our experts on two pivotal points. Two countries, the USA and China, are setting the pace. They are far ahead of any other in terms of global influence. In 2026, their direct competition will manifest itself in more grey zone conflict, proxy battles over tech and trade, narrative warfare, and even an emerging space race. Trump's Venezuela intervention has only catalyzed this, with many believing it may have changed China's calculus over Taiwan. With two big power blocks jostling for dominance, Europe is struggling to find its place. We're witnessing this with the huge angst over Trump's suggestion that he'll take over Greenland. What does that mean for the EU? What does that mean for NATO? With the global order shaped by these strong leaders rather than institutions, we are shifting from what are our shared principles to what can you do for me? America doesn't have anyone's back anymore. Our polling finds 7 in 10 people wanting their country to be more assertive of our national interests, even if this creates friction with other countries. These nationalist viewpoints are at the heart of the newly minted US national security strategy. As one expert put it, it's like standing on a shattered piece of glass, which hasn't broken, but it could. The debate over how the global economy will perform in 2026 was particularly intense among our experts. On one side, you have cautious optimists. They believe there'll be a muddle-through scenario where resilience continues. They also point to the boost to growth from capital reallocation into defense, renewables, and of course, AI. Finally, they say President Trump plans to juice the economy in the run-up to the midterms. On the other side are the pessimists, arguing the economy is on a precipice, and while we may not fall off this year, a reckoning is coming. While a few see this as a bubble bursting, most of the experts that we talk to see it as the inevitable churn that comes with a transformational new technology. Regardless of who is right, there is general agreement among experts that we will be witnessing a tale of two economies this year. This graph shows the spectacular growth of the Magnificent Seven stocks in purple set against consumer sentiment in green. Just as there was a K-shaped divergence in opinion between public and leaders, we're witnessing a K-shaped economy. The winners are the high-income earners and tech industries, while those on low incomes and more traditional sectors struggle. Most people across the 27 countries we polled expect to be worse off next year, with only those on high incomes believing they will be better off. The major exception is the United States of America, where overall most expect to be better off next year. The cost of living is the most important issue for people across generations, and regardless of party or political affiliations in all but a handful of countries, high prices will remain a potent factor this year. The salience of affordability feeds into public attitudes on tax. Large majorities in all of the countries we polled want more of the tax burden to be borne by business and the best off. 64% of people believe that the governments should introduce a wealth tax. The era of leaders being able to easily identify and influence all their stakeholders is now over, and 2026 will be the year of atomized influence. Influence now flows through multiple ecosystems. Mainstream media will still matter in 2026, but it's less and less influential in the face of collapsing public trust. 61% of people around the world believe that mainstream news media have their own agenda and can't be trusted to report things in a fair and balanced way. The hierarchy of trust in 2026 is medical doctors, 85%, big business, 41%, big tech companies, 38%, chat GPT, 34%, and politicians lagging way behind on 22%. That hierarchy of influence continues to be written with the rise of large language models. Their reliance is on sources like Reddit and Wikipedia, as well as traditional news sources. Being visible in all of these channels is now essential for influence. Businesses and governments, though, have increasingly complex and nuanced messages to deliver, but the environment rewards simplicity, provocation, and tribal signaling. There's a whole raft of political leaders out there who are trying to solve things by sound bites. Social isolation, which is a strong driver of populism, is on the rise. 47% of people now report feeling disconnected from society around them. The more I think about that statistic, the more chilling I think it is, and the disengagement runs deeper still. When presented with the matrix dilemma, bear with me, a choice between the blue pill, blissful ignorance, and the red pill, complex, risky reality, a quarter of people opted for the blue pill. This is more pronounced among younger generations. Over a third of Gen Z would choose blue, preferring comforting illusion to difficult reality. In this atomized stakeholder universe, the question for 2026 isn't whether the fragmentation is good or bad, it's whether organizations can adapt fast enough to learn how to influence others. Now, there's a lot to take in this rewired world where pessimism and division are so prevalent. How should a leader learn to navigate this? Leaders we spoke to thought that strategy is now more important than ever. If you haven't got a strategy, you're lost. After strategy, the next most used word was agility. You've got to be able to move fast and adapt your plans. One compelling analogy that came from our interviews was satellite navigation, the idea that leaders need to be clear on their destination, but also flexible on how they get there. You need a North Star, but a bit like a GPS, you're going to have to rework route, roadworks, delays, traffic jams. The constant impact of politics on the life of business leaders is clearly here to stay. You're permanently at risk of getting on the wrong side of a political or a moral argument. And so you're going to have short-term noise and long-term decisions. And I think balancing that is absolutely crucial. Another major theme was the need for authenticity. Authenticity, by definition, is infinitely durable. You are what you are. If you can deliver in that way, the current trends of the day don't matter. Finally, the need to be a storyteller shone through. Storytelling is the biggest thing. Social media divides us, hates complexity, kills concentration, nothing sticks. Leaders must repeat their message relentlessly. Strategy, agility, authenticity, and storytelling. These are the hallmarks of the work I try to do at FGS. But I want to end today by mentioning something else. There's a business side to this, and then there's a human side to this. The pace of change is absolutely daunting. It would not be strange to be, it should not be strange to be concerned or pessimistic about this world. I think it's understandable that people are. How should the average human being learn how to cope with all of this? I created a podcast and a Substack on this. It's called Desperately Seeking Wisdom, and the point is to try to wrestle with some of the big themes that we've had today as a human being. I would make 2 big points. The first is we all need to learn to respond more and react less. We definitely live in a world where you need to move at pace in a crisis situation, but most situations aren't a crisis. Taking a moment to stop and assess is absolutely vital. Do I need to hit back? Is my first reaction the right one? What if I didn't add energy to this? What if I was more gentle and considerate? Second, I think we all need to be a lot more open and less closed. It seems to me that the temptation in a world like today's is to retreat into our comfort zones, to attack what feels unusual and strange. I've found that stopping and listening, as well as being open to experience, is what has really served me well. Perhaps we can talk about this a bit in the Q&A, but I do think the answer to all of this pessimism, all this bleak news, is to embrace life. We live in a world of risk and pain, and there are no guarantees. But it's amazing to be here and to get to experience it all. This is one of the most interesting times in human history, and we should be grateful that we're here. Even if it is sometimes hard to hear, and even if it is sometimes still painful, it is worth it. Thank you very much.